Tonight's class, as always, is in the memory of Yitzchak Tzvi ben Yosef, and the Neshama should have an elevation, and for all of our soldiers that are fighting in Israel, Baruch Hashem, they free 2 hostages. Fortunately, more have died, unfortunately, but it should be only good news. Okay, so, we got to start with a joke, right? That's one of the rules, every rabbi knows. So what is the very oldest joke in the entire Jewish culture of jokes? Even before mother, we have husband jokes, mother-in-law jokes, probably even before the mother-in-law jokes and the husband jokes. The oldest joke, perhaps the oldest Jewish joke, is of this guy that's gets shipwrecked on a deserted, abandoned island, right? Everyone in this room knows the joke. And they finally rescue him years later. He's so proud to show everyone the beautiful life he made for himself on this deserted island. You don't know the joke? Wow. So he's so proud. It's this beautiful life he made for himself on this deserted island. He built himself homes and everything and roads, and he had a whole, he built everything. He was like Steve, with no distraction, just worked all day. And he finally, they're showing him around, it's like the main street, and he showed them this building is the shul. He built himself a synagogue where he could pray. They see another building, and what's this building? He said, oh, that's also a shul. So they asked him, why do you need 2 shuls? He said, this is the shul that I go to, and this is the shul I'll never go to. Well, I'm surprised that joke went over well. Okay. We're going to have a good night then. If that joke went over well. Exactly. Okay. If someone's watching my personal page, say hi. Kim, if you want to comment? You did comments? Why am I not seeing the comments? I don't get the delay. I give up. I didn't see any comments. I don't know if anyone's watching. It's not showing me on here. Okay. I know Chabad are watching. That's good enough. And I have a crowd here, so that's good. Let's go. Okay. So today we're going to talk about the shul, but not this shul. This shul's done. The original shul, the shul of all shuls, the sanctuary of all sanctuaries, the temple of all temples, the first place that was built as a meeting place where Jews can meet with God, which is the Mishkan. That's right. Until this week's Torah reading and until the Mishkan, when Jews wanted to be spiritual and connect to God, they got on their hands and knees and prayed, or they took an altar. Wherever they were, there was no limitations on where a Jew could make an altar. They made an altar, they set it up, and they prayed to God, and they did what they had to do, and they prayed. And this week's Torah reading, we come to the Jews, and we'll talk about soon when this happens, but we are introduced to a very important mitzvah, where God says to the Jewish people, "Va'asu li mikdash, v'shachanti b'socham, make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell in them." And then God goes into tremendous detail to describe every single specific item, every single specific vessel, the measurements, the material it should be made of, how it should be constructed, how big it should be, the way it should be, how it should look. Every single detail of the Mishkan. Both the vessels, the interior designs, the curtains, the beams, the sockets, the dimensions, the fence in the courtyard, everything. There are 13 chapters of Torah dedicated to the minute details of the building of the Mishkan. 13 chapters. Yeah, and a lot of Jews say exactly what Michelle just said out loud. How bored? What?
It's called the Meshuggah.
What is Meshuggah?
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's 13 chapters of detail. That's a lot of detail.
Does it have to do with Torah and Mitzvot that we do?
No, it's 13 chapters. And of course, just to give you context, you know how many chapters describe creation of the universe? One. One chapter for God's creation of the universe, 13 chapters for our creation of a home for God. And this is something we've talked about before. It's a very important idea. It's not going to be the main theme of tonight's conversation, but that God is a lot more interested in the home that we will make for Him than He is in the home that He made for us. So the home He made for us, even though we're talking about galaxies and cosmos and heavens and earth and species and flowers and trees and plants and animals, it's one chapter. You don't get into so much detail how many different kinds of birds God made. God just said, I made the birds, the birds are flying around like 3-4 verses, done with the birds. Okay? Animals, flowers, 2-3 verses. You know how many kinds of flowers there are? How much variety there is in the botanical universe or in bird life? People go bird watching, go to early in the morning to sit and watch all the different kinds of birds. To God, that's not so interesting. But the exact details of each and every vessel in the Mishkan, that's very interesting. So why is that? What is the simple and obvious classic explanation why there's so much detail in the building of a home for God?
Because human beings were building the temple of God, the creation.
You know, I understand. So God wants to hear about our creation. He wants to hear what we built for God. I get that part. I get that part completely. The question is, why does God spend so much more time in details? Because this whole, anyone heard the construction? Or you ever built something? And the details, yeah, I did. I was with my contractor today. On details. We're talking about door handles, and we're talking about the molding, we're talking about the details of details. But that's where the beauty is. And that's where you see the difference between good work and bad work. But most importantly, that's where a person feels their real desire come out. When a person's working on a project, where do you really find your personality? It's in the details. So God is giving us the details by which we can express Him and make a home where God could be found. Now and therefore with that in mind, it's critical for a Jew to know that the menorah had 22 goblets on it, and that it was 10 cubits high, and that the ark was made out of gold, gold, with an overlay of gold on the inside and the outside, and that there were poles on the two sides, and the poles didn't come out of the sides, they remained in the side, as opposed to the other vessels where the poles did come out of the sides, and that there was a rim of gold around. It's important to know that rim, and the size of the rim, and the fact that there were the cherubs, not just there were cherubs. What was their image? How big were they? Why were they touched? Etc., etc. Every one of these details, if God told it to us, that is a part of us making a home for God.
So basically God created all the material.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I mean, God made everything in the world, but God wants us.
The material for the Mishkan.
God made everything in the world. I'm not sure what he's saying.
They came from Egypt. They didn't know how to create stuff. The Jews that
Okay.
came from Egypt, they work up with the Lebanon and things, so God showed them.
Okay, let's stay focused. So, the point is, we have a job. God is giving us, so to say, a prototype. And God is telling us that every detail is going to be a part of how we make a home for God. Now, many people read this and they say it's boring. Why is it boring? Because you can't relate the details to our lives. So when you read about the rim around the ark, or you read about the different materials that were used and all that, it easily becomes boring to a person because we don't see how the home that was built out of material back then in the desert has any relevance to the home that we have to make for God today. Okay. So what we are going to do for the next few weeks, I'm going to start a new series, and I spent a lot of time today, very conflicted in what I was going to teach tonight, but we're going to go through the different vessels of the Mishkan, one by one, each one a week, a full week, just for each one. For one. My wife's like, just do a few together. I said, I can't do that. That's not the way. We're going to go in depth. We're going to discover the ark, and we're going to understand the ark, and we're going to understand how is the ark in my life? How can I relate and find myself in the story, in the details, in the construction, in the materials of the ark? And how can we do that in the menorah? And keep us awake. Now, the truth is, I'm going to say this. I wasn't going to say this, but I have to tell you the truth. This is my idea already from last week. I struggled over the weekend. On Sunday, I was learning, and I couldn't find how to make the ark relevant. I was struggling with it. I have to tell you, I was struggling. I was like, I came home from school like Monday, like 3 hours ago, and I have some other ideas on the Mishkan, but I didn't have the core idea of the ark. So like, should I keep on studying? Should I keep on looking? Or should I just switch gears to something else, which we're going to do? And so I was like, okay, I switcched gears. Because you have to and then about 45 minutes ago as I was learning, the light bulb went, and I have a brilliant idea, but I didn't have time to develop it. I already had something else. I already was in a different... So just you should know that we have a good class coming up. Not going to be next week because of the Parashas, but we will do a class on the Ark that's going to be, I think, very, very relevant. And yeah, so we will talk about the Ark. I already have the core of the message and the journey of where we're going to go on the Ark. But I want to go back, before we even get to the Ark, I want to really take home this point that I just made, which is that every one of us, at whatever point in our lives we are, whether we think we're holy or we think we're terrible, has an active part to do in creating a home for God in our lives. Because unless we can really not only accept that premise in an intellectual way, But unless we can feel that premise, unless we can accept that wherever I'm holding in my life, I have a job of transforming my physicality into a home for God, then there's no point in talking about not about the ark and not about the menorah, not about the golden altar inside and about the copper altar outside. There's 5 weeks, by the way, in the wash basin. It was going to be a 5-week series. Now it's going to be a 6-week series. So I can do a whole class on the ark, on the menorah, on the altar, on the table, on the shulchan, and on the wash basin. It's a lot. But unless we first accept that me in my life, and I'm not a rabbi, not me, I'm saying someone sitting here, someone watching, they might think, I'm not a rabbi, I'm not a contractor, I'm not so spiritual, I'm just a carpenter, I'm just not a building of Mishka, but I just sell car insurance, I'm retired, and so how am I going to be building a Mishkan for God? I'm retired. You have to accept that wherever you are, you have a role in the building of the Mishkan. So I want to analyze this. I want to give you 2 different perspectives that come to the same, 2 different roads that will bring us to the same place, to recognize that no matter where we are in our lives, no matter what station we're at, we have a role to do in building the Mishkan. Somebody said this morning, you'll forgive me, but there's some beautiful ideas I want to share today. Okay? Let's start first with when was the command to build the Mishkan given to the Jewish people? When was the command, reading this week's Torah reading, God says to the Jewish people, make for me a sanctuary, I'll dwell in them. God tells Moshe, go to the Jewish people, take a truma, take a donation. This morning I talked about the taking of a donation. This morning I asked about taking a donation versus giving a donation, the whole discussion. But when did this happen? When does God tell Moshe to go to the Jewish people and to ask them to start a building campaign? Like, when was the building campaign launched, right? Every building campaign has a launch. Now this one even had an end date. Most building campaigns never end because they never have enough money. They're always still but this one actually they ended. And Moshe told the Jewish people, stop, no more money, we have enough money, we have more than we need, we're not going to keep everything. That's what happened, surprisingly. The first and last time in history, they had more money than they needed. Never happened again since. That time it happened. Let's try to make that happen too. But so it happened. But so when was the official building campaign launched? So there's actually 3 different opinions brought as to when this story that we're reading about in the Torah, reading about the instructions given by God to Moshe to build the Mishkan, and to build the ark, and to build the menorah, and to build the table, and all that. When was it said by God to Moshe? When did Moshe tell it to the Jewish people?
At the first commandment.
The first commandment of the 10 Commandments?
Yeah.
No, that's I'm the Lord your God.
Yeah, so
That sets the tone.
Yeah, but it sets the tone, yes. But the actual details of all the construction, we're going to spend 2 parshas this week of Truma, and the next week Tetzaveh is explaining the building of the instructions of how the Mishkan should be built. This week is primarily the Mishkan. Next week is the clothing of the priests and how they're inaugurated. And then Vayakab Kudei, which is 2 Torah readings that describe the actual construction itself. It seems very repetitive because it talks about the instruction of God to Moses, and then Moses to the Jewish people, all the details again. All the details again. So it gives us a lot of weeks to talk about the Mishkan.
after the golden calf.
So there's 3 opinions. The Zohar, the first opinion in the Zohar is that immediately after Har Sinai, immediately after God gave the Torah to the Jews at Mount Sinai, God told Moshe about the building of the Mishkan. And immediately Moshe came down, guys, we need to make a Mishkan for, as soon as they had the tablets, God already told them where the tablets should go. You're going to need an ark, you're going to need a Holy of Holies, you're going to need a Mishkan. That's the first opinion brought in the Zohar. Okay, Randy likes it. 3 opinions. The second opinion brought, also by the Zohar, second rabbi in the Zohar, is that God told Moshe about the building of the Mishkan immediately after the giving of the Torah. But you know what happened? He told this to Moshe while Moshe was on the mountain. Now, by the time Moshe got down the mountain, what happened? The Jews had already made a golden calf. So although God had told Moshe about the building of a Mishkan and the ark and the tabernacle and all the wood and everything, but Moshe didn't get a chance to tell the Jewish people until after Yom Kippur. Because then Moshe went back up the mountain to get forgiveness, etc. And only on Yom Kippur, which was the day that Moshe came down the mountain of Sinai for the 3rd time with the second set of tablets, and with the formal forgiveness of God to the Jewish people, that's when Moshe tells the Jews to start making a Mishkan, which was finished being built on Rosh Chodesh Nisan 6 months later. Okay? What? 6 months. Because there's no permitting process, that's why. There's no permitting process. No Broward County review, no EPA environmental regulation. There's no Home Depot, that's true. They went to Shittim instead, the place where they bought stuff. There's no Amazon. They had the Clouds of Glory, Clouds of Glory Express. I don't know. Okay, that's the second opinion. The third opinion, which is actually the opinion brought by Rashi, which is a classic understanding. Rashi tells us that the whole story only happened after the golden calf. And after God forgave the Jewish people, God said to the Jewish people, if you want to really reconnect with me and create a place where I can be present with you, make a Mishkan. And after you make a Mishkan, I will once again allow my presence to rest with you the way it rested with you for that short time when I was on Mount Sinai, when God descended, little we know by Mount Sinai, God descended on the mountain. God was revealed in a mountain, or on a mountain, I should say. And all the Jews looked and they saw, that's God. So God is saying, now it's gone. Golden calf, God left. God left. But if you want to recreate that sense of closeness where you can feel my presence in your life, make a mikdash, make a sanctuary, and then I once again dwell, my presence will reside with you. So we have three opinions to recap. First opinion in Zohar is that Moshe told the Jews already by the giving of the Torah on Sinai about the building of the Mishkan, and they already commenced construction then. Immediately they started that very same day, before the golden calf, before anything. Which may explain how the golden calf could happen, because they had already been told about the Kruvim. I'll explain, it's important, just so you can appreciate this. This is a very, very simple question. God on Mount Sinai told the Jews, don't make idols, right? And what do they do 40 days later? They make an idol. It boggles the mind. And we've talked about this, how could you explain that? So a very simple, it's according to the Zohar, is the reason why the Jews made an idol is because God had already told them to make the Kruvim, which are the two cherub-like, angel-like images on top of the ark, which we're going to talk about, God willing, in the right time. So they already were told before the golden calf about making a home for the tablets and making these idol-like images, these two statue figurines, or figurine, the male and female, facing each other. So if you have already read the command, or you've been told by Moses about making an ark and a home for the tablets, and on top should be these two images of these two like angels facing each other, so then the golden calf is not so far-fetched, because yes, God said don't make an idol. God said doesn't say don't make an idol. God said make no other gods, but then God himself said to make these Kruvim. So that would actually help us understand how the Jews could sin by the golden calf, if we understand the first opinion in the Zohar, that they were already told about this before the sin of the golden calf. So that's opinion number one. The Jews didn't build it until after. Everyone agrees that it was built after after Yom Kippur and was finished in the first day of the month of Nisan. But at least they were told about it. They knew about it. The second opinion in the Zohar is that God told Moshe before the golden calf, but the Jews built it. Moshe told the Jews about it after the golden calf. And then the third opinion, which is Rashi, which is a Medrash, is that the whole thing happened after the golden calf, after Yom Kippur. So what does this say to us? Now, obviously on the physical plane, you can't have all three can't be correct. Either one happened, the other, right? But in the spiritual dimension, all of these are relevant to us in understanding when do we have the command of God that we should build a Mishkan. Remember, we're trying to understand how this is relevant to us, right? We're trying to understand how in our lives we can find it relevant that God is telling me at the current place where I find myself that I have a job to build a home for Him. So at what point in our lives, in our spiritual place, are we being given this command that this is already to make a home for God? So it depends. Let's understand these two places. After the giving of the Torah, or by the giving of the Torah before the golden calf, at what spiritual level are the Jews holding? The highest level you can imagine. Right? Dvorah is right. When the Jews were at the level of Mount Sinai, they were 49 days of the Omer, spiritually counting, spiritually preparing themselves, spiritually elevating themselves to be ready for the greatest divine revelation. And then they see God at Mount Sinai, and their souls left their bodies, and they said Nasa v'nishma, and they got the crown. It's amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. On the highest spiritual level. So you may think, okay, that's one level. That's one place where a Jew can find themselves. There are times in our lives when we find ourselves on a high spiritual, we're on the climax. We're feeling inspired, we're uplifted, we're righteous people, we're doing what God wants, we're feeling really spiritually connected to God. That's one place. The second place where a Jew can find himself is in the lowest place. He experienced it high, and then before God tells him, he does a golden calf. But God hasn't forgiven him yet. Right? The second opinion of the Zohar is that this happens in the in-between time. It's after the giving by the golden calf, but Moshe doesn't tell them till later. So that command is coming to them at a time when they've sinned, but they haven't been forgiven yet. You're on the low. You've sinned, but you're still in the sin. You haven't fixed it yet. You're on the lowest end possible. Because if the Jews are on the highest high at Shavuos, at the giving of the Torah, after the golden calf, until Yom Kippur, they're on the lowest of the low. They're like as far removed as can be. God says, I want to kill you guys. I don't want my presence to be found near you. I don't want you. I'm starting over. Like, God and the Jews are, it's definitely, they're living separately at the time. He's staying by a friend's house for a few weeks. Like, they're living separate. What? They had couches. They had sleeping bags, whatever. He had a sleeping bag outside in the, in the outhouse, literally. So that's the second place where sometimes we find ourselves. At that time, after the sin, before forgiveness. The third time, described by Rashi, is that the whole story of the Mishkan only begins after Yom Kippur, which is after God has forgiven us. After God has forgiven us. So, you're sinned, but now you've cleansed. You made a mess, but you're about Teshuvah. You've done wrong, but now you've uplifted and elevated yourselves. So now, building a Mishkan, and I skipped an important part over here. Building a Mishkan. What are you doing with a Mishkan? You're taking physical items and you're elevating them, uplifting them to spirituality. Let's go back 1 second. How does God say to make a home for him? How does God say to make a home for God? Take 15 items. Take gold and silver and copper and red crimson wool and blue dyed wool and the chilazon dyed wool and the tachash skin, which is the unicorn skin, and ateshit and the wool, the hair of a goat dyed, and oil for the lighting of the menorah, and ateshitim wood, and oil for incense and spices. Bring these physical materials together, and with these physical materials, you make a home for me. There's nothing there about spirituality, nothing about praying, nothing about anything holy. It's about physical construction with physical measurements of physical stuff to make a physical home. Correct? Which seemingly is, God is everyone, yet God is saying that if you want to find me, it's in the details. You have to create this physical space with physical objects for me to live there. So what may happen? A Jew may say, Jew number one will say, well, okay, I understand why God wants a physical home for God if you're not so righteous. If you're a physical person, so God says, okay, you want a home? Make a beautiful building. Like, why do we in Chabad want to have a beautiful building? Because a lot of Jews, they care about external, superficial things, and they want to go to a beautiful building. They care less about the rabbi of the building and more about the carpet and how pretty it is. So where do you belong? Not that I belong to this rabbi. I belong to this, the one with the nicer chandeliers. I don't know. The one that has the nicer front doors, has a prettier lobby. Okay. Right? It's all about status and belonging and accepting. I feel like a certain symbol that can say belong to this fancy schmancy place. So many Jews care about physical things. So you gotta entice them. You gotta be a welcoming environment. So we gotta make sure we're the most beautiful shul in town. But a very holy Jew, the first kind of person we're describing in the Zohar, the kind of guy that's still living on the Mount Sinai experience, he says, this has nothing to do with me. Me get involved with physical construction, I should get involved in getting gold and silver and copper and all these things. Nothing to do with me. I don't need that. I'm going to go outside and meditate, and I'll do, Bodhidut, and I'll do meditation, I'll learn Torah. I don't need a world. I don't need to be involved in physical things. I don't need any of this stuff. It's not relevant for me. Yeah? Second kind of Jew is the exact opposite. Second kind of Jew is a kind of Jew that is so far removed, says, I have nothing to do with this. I'm a sinner. I'm a bad Jew. You ever met a Jew that tells you, I'm a bad Jew? And they wear it like a badge of pride, by the way. Like a big badge right here. I'm a bad Jew. And they say it like, especially they're feeling guilty, but they say it like, there's a lot of conviction in that. A lot of conviction in that I'm a bad Jew. I'm a bad Jew. I'm a sinner. I did a golden calf and have not done Yom Kippur. You know what I'm saying? I am officially labeled bad Jew. So I understand, says such a Jew, the value of making a Mishkan for God. Sure, I understand the value that, Jews that are more spiritually connected, that are more traditional, that are more, they should build a synagogue, they should build a sanctuary, they should go to Shul on Shabbos. But for me, there's nothing to do.
So why did you come in Yom Kippur?
Good question. Ask them. And then you have a third kind of Jew. And what's the third kind of a Jew? He's a Baal Teshuvah. Baal Teshuvah is a person who was far removed, and now he's yearning to get close to God. And now he's on a spiritual journey. And such a person, sometimes they get the most confused. Start talking to them about physical money for a building campaign. I'm searching for God right now. What are you confusing me with buildings? I know people like that. Like, Rabbi, you're too into the physical. We should be all spiritual. Forget the world. Forget anything. And they're so on fire. They're so like, oh, God is like, they feel it. And to their credit, they're really on fire. You're talking to me about physical mitzvot. You're talking to me about physical charity, physical work, a physical home for God. God is spiritual. God is transcendent. God is ethereal. I don't know what you're talking about. Comes along the different opinions of the Torah and tells you that when does God give us the command to build a mishkan, to build a home for God? At exactly the moment in your life where you are, no matter where you are. If you're at the high of Mount Sinai, God is speaking to you at that moment, according to one opinion Zohar. That's the time that God says, make a physical home for me. To the other Jew who thinks he's the bad Jew kind of person with the badge, and the story of how he got kicked out of yeshiva when he was 5 years old, right? And there's a whole list of stories I'll tell you, how the Rebbe did this and how he burnt down the school of his building. And I know someone in our community. He was such a good kid in school. He literally went up to the roof of his school when he was in yeshiva years ago. Him and two friends, and they lit a fire on the roof. They weren't so smart. It's like a tar roof, and they're like, I don't know how much damage they did. He got kicked out. Okay, right? So I got kicked out of school, and my Rebbe hated me, and I haven't been shown in 20 years. Guess what? The command of God to build a home, to build a physical edifice and structure for God applies to that person as well. Yeah. And the guy that thinks now he's spiritual, he says, I'm delicate. Don't confuse me with physical things. I want to be holy. I want to be spiritual. I want to study Torah all day. To him too, the Torah is saying, make for me a physical home for God. Make for me a mikdash out of the physical world, and that's where I will dwell. It's a beautiful idea. The first thing we do when we hear the command to make a home for God is we right away put up some kind of reason why it doesn't apply to us. It doesn't apply to us. Either I'm too holy, or I'm too far removed from Judaism, or I'm too old, or I'm too young, or I'm too poor, or I'm too rich, or I'm too something. Everyone has a reason why being an active partner with God and transforming the world into a home for Him is something they can do. We all have some kind of explanation why it's not for us. Comes along the Torah and is saying to us that every single Jew at any current place or station that they find themselves in is a part of God's vision for a home in this world. Every one of us. We are a part of God's vision of transformation where the physical becomes spiritual. Okay. That's one idea. Now I'm going to tell you the same idea, but from a completely different angle now. Also, the opening of the parsha. So the Torah starts telling us about the different materials that were used for this transformative process of making a physical home for a spiritual God. And what are the materials needed for a physical home for the spiritual God? So the first verse tells us the three primary materials used in the building of the Mishkan was gold, silver, and copper. Okay, and then you have the wood of shittim, which is another conversation. Gold, silver, and copper. Three materials are the primary materials. Then you have also the actual vessels, the walls. They were all made of gold, silver, and copper. The curtains were made out of the skins were the curtains. But this is all the vessels and the exception of the wood, which the difference between gold and the wood is a beautiful difference between gold and the wood. But we're going to save that for the class on the ark. No, I know it's going to be part of the class on the ark. So we're not going to talk about the wood this week. Not because we're saving it for a different week. For now, I want to talk about the gold, silver, and copper. Okay? Now, what's the most precious of the three? Gold. Right? Gold is the most precious. And yet, silver is what's most commonly used by people. Gold is not used as a form of currency. Silver is a form of currency. And copper has really very little, not little value, but it's not a fancy or expensive material. Copper is a building material. Copper is used in...
So your home phone, you need copper.
Copper is used in air conditioning coils, and it's used in electricity, it's used in your home phone. Copper is used in a lot of things, which is actually why sometimes people will steal copper or air conditioning lines because it has a resale value. But generally speaking, copper is not a fancy or an exclusive kind of material. What?
It's nothing to name.
Not as pretty as
More than
silver today.
Say again? It's not as pretty.
As much as silver today. Copper is.
Copper's expensive today. It is copper today, correct. People steal copper today, actually.
That's why I see.
Yeah, I'm telling you, people steal copper. Construction sites have a big problem with people steal the material from construction. Yeah.
They still do, especially construction sites.
I just said it like 10 seconds
I
ago.
didn't see that.
But I'm glad you agree with me. I literally just said that, but yes.
And they steal them off the poles.
What?
They steal them off the poles, all the electric poles and whatever.
Or people have their air conditioning, whatever.
The wires for the phone company, they cut them right off the pole.
Okay, so what is the difference, my friends, between gold, silver, and copper? Let's talk about these three materials. So gold in Kabbalah is actually a reddish material because gold is compared to fire. Has the color of fire and gold, which is part of its beauty probably. It has connections to fire. And fire in Kabbalah is the idea of gevura, of ascent, of elevation. What happens? Why does fire go up? Fire is a transformative material. So you have wood, or you have whatever it is, and the fire burns it. And it transforms it from being wood to now being nothing, to being light, to being heat, to being energy. But it transforms it from what it was. It destroys its materialism and makes it spiritual and holy. So that's fire. In Kabbalah, gold, zahav, is compared to gvura, which is the idea of gvura is severity, where a person is very disciplined, very controlled, very tough, like fire, which fire is always about going up, ascent. About ascent. This is a Jew that serves God with fear of God, with gevura, is the idea of severity, the idea of there's no monkey business with them, right? Everything is by the rules, they're very, very super focused on their spiritual service. There's no distraction, there's no, they're focused on God exclusively. In fact, such a Jew is compared to the highest level of a tzaddik. He's perfect, like gold. It's very exquisite, it's very expensive, it's very rare, it's very delicate, right? But it's pure. And gold is pure gold. Jew that has Torah also is compared to gold. Torah is compared to gold in many places. The Torah of Hashem is compared to gold. The person is about elevating themselves. They're praying, they're learning, they're studying. Their whole life is a life of ascent, like fire. The gold, the fire of gold, the color of fire, which is in the gold, is the idea of going up to God. Silver, kesef. What color is silver?
Gray.
Gray. Its root is white. It's pure. Has no sin in it. It's a white color. As opposed to the transformative color of red, which is, but the silver in Hebrew, the word kesef is from the word nichsof nichsaftu, which means like the yearning and cleaving to God, right? Kol sanafshi, my soul is longing for God. Many verses. Friday night we sing that. The idea of longing, of a yearning. So silver in Kabbalah is compared to the love of the right side of chesed. Silver is av, it's love, a yearning, a longing, a desire, a closeness for someone. Okay? So you have gold is fire, gold is gvura, is judgment, is severity, it's toughness, but it's pure. And the silver is the idea of ava, of a longing. What? Yeah, and then you have copper. What's copper? No, copper, as we said, is a building material. Copper comes from the word, the Hebrew word for copper is nechoshet. And what other word do you recognize in the word nechoshet? Nun chet shin is nachash. What does nachash mean? Snake. So nechoshet, nun chet shin taf is copper. Take away the last letter. Nun chet shin is nachash, snake. We all know what the snake is. What's the snake? What's the snake? What? The bottom. This the poison. The snake is poison. The icon of evil in the world is the snake. Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. What introduced sin to the world? What tempted man? The original temptation, the original Yetzer Hara, the original desire for indulgence, for pleasure, for self-gratification originates with the snake. Right? It's a snake. So nechosha, which is copper, is very much connected to the idea of the snake. The snake, nechosha. What? Oh, that's a good question. Why would you want something that represents a sinner on the altar? Excellent question. But let's first go through all three in the types of Jews. We already know what nechosha is. We figured that one out already, right? But let's start with the first one. So, what do you think gold represents? The gold, the perfect tzaddik? Which one they say is clean and pure? The red or the white? The white is pure. Red is about transformation. Red is a fire. Red is what's a fire? I think I said this. I'll say it again. Red is the color of the burning of wood, this coarse, thick lump of wood being burnt and being transformed into not dust, into fire, into light. Into light. The smoke is what remains in it. So whatever, if you want to get really Kabbalistic, there's four elements. There's Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Afa. There's water, air, earth, and wind in every single thing. So when you burn the log, happens is the log primarily, the most predominant aspect of it is its earthiness, right? But it also has water and air and Ruach, Afa. Water, air, and fire inside the log of wood. And then when you burn it, now the fire becomes predominant. The ash, the upper part, the earth part becomes ash. The ruach part becomes the smoke, and that's the smoke and the water. Actually, the smoke is a combination of the ruach and the mayim. Whatever. The point is, I don't know why I started saying this because you asked the question, you said something. Whatever. The point is that fire is transformation. Okay, that's fire, and that's why gold is a color of red. Red is a color of not of purity. What's the color of red? What does it represent? Red. Devil. Wearing the red sweater. But yeah, red is a color of sin. Red is a color, actually the devil. We don't believe in the devil in Judaism. But the reason why they use red for the color of the devil is because red is the color of sin. There's a very famous verse where the prophet says, "Im yadimu katoila," if my sin will be as red as a scarlet, kasemeri should be like pure, clean, like white wool. If they'll be like a red, like a crimson something, they should become pure like snow. Right? Snow is pure white. Wool is pure. On Yom Kippur we wear white. And even if you're careful not to wear white, we don't wear red on Yom Kippur. Red is a color of sin. It still is, till today. Red is a color of indulgence, a color of, right?
So why do they describe red as love?
Because love is indulgence. Love is not inherently a sin, but yes, people think of love as being sinful, and romance and lust could definitely be a sin. Yes, and lust and those colors as red is definitely a color that's used, considered a more lustful kind of color. So when we describe gold, Gold is not a perfect tzaddik who never sinned. The man who's yearning for, the man who's in love with God, who's just pure ecstasy, that's silver. You guys following me? It's a little deep, but it's beautiful. It's the silver that's pure. It's the silver that's this just pure, unchanged love to God. Kesef, which is the Hebrew word for silver, is from the Hebrew word of love. So the man that loves God, the real tzaddik, is not the gold. The real tzaddik is the silver. It's the silver. The gold is representative of who? The person who's on fire. Who's on fire? The Baal Teshuvah. Very good. The Baal Teshuvah. He's on fire now, but the reason why he's red, you ever see like two people davening? The guy that's always been religious, he's, the FFB they call him. I'm going to give you some like inside information. The FFB, he's regularly, you don't see, he's not like burning up. A Baal Teshuvah just started praying a few months. He's like shuckling away and he's praying, like you can tell. He's on fire, right? It's like when wood is being burned. It's not like a quiet, like you have oil burning. It's peaceful, it's quiet, it's burning nicely, it doesn't make a lot of noise. And then you have fire burning. What's happening? It's crackling and it's smoking and it's dirty and you smell it. Correct?
Yes.
Why? Because for fire to burn requires transformation. So transformation is a messy process. It's a noisy process. So during the course of this piece of wood being transformed to a fire, there's going to be ash and there's going to be smoke and there's going to be noise and there's going to be all this, a whole production. Oil is meant to be fire. It's a natural process. So when you put a wick into the oil, there's no noise, there's no smoke, there's no smell. It's peace. The nichsof nichsafti, the longing, the ava, the purity, the desire of a tzaddik to God is silver. No hoo-ha, there's no burning, there's no smoke, there's no nothing. It's silver. It's in love with God. It has no distractions from God. All it has is a longing to be close to God. It's love. It's the Baal Teshuvah. It's the one that's transformed their life. That is gold. That is fire. That is a whole mess. Now it's beautiful. Before we go further, let's go to the Nachash for a second. The Choshet to the copper. We already know what that is. What's the copper Jew?
Bad boy.
That's the bad boy. Yeah, that's the bad boy. That's the guy who's in love with a snake, who's in bed with the snake, and is, he's happy with the snake. The snake has got him wrapped around, what's it called? The snake wraps around? What? A coil, whatever. The snake, when the snake captures their prey, what? Yeah, they wrap around, whatever. They wrap around, the snake grabs its prey and it squeezes it to death. So this is a guy who's caught inside the coil of the snake. He's a sinner. He's copper. It's good building material, but that's about it. I'm saying there's no holiness here. There's no beauty in the sinner. Now you might think that who should build the Mishkan? Well, each will say, not me. Baal Teshuvah will say, the gold Jew will say, I can't be involved in building a home for God and making a transformation for the world. I'm still working on myself. I'm still on my own spiritual journey. Don't talk to me about the home for God and transforming the world and taking physical and making it spiritual. I'm not there yet. Now, tzaddik might say, don't bother me. I'm silver. I'm in love with God. I'm pure. I have no distraction. I have no nothing inside me. I already have God. I don't need a home. I don't need a shul. I'm happy without a shul. Don't bother me. There are some people that they find the shul distraction to their spiritual closeness to God. The shul, I don't know if you noticed that some people talk in shul, some people come later, right? And some people, not here, never, God forbid. Because here the sermons are so interesting. And the rabbi's sermons, well, no, that's quiet. But I'm saying, some people that come to shul to talk. I don't know what to talk. So anyway, some really holy silver Jews, or rather the gold Jews, they find the distraction. The home for God is it's really more the gold Jews that are they're on their own spiritual journey. They get bent out of shape very, very quickly, right? They get bent out of shape. One little thing, gold gets dented very easily. Gold is delicate. Gold gets dented. It's why you don't wear it every single day. It's not hardy. It's soft. And this Baal Teshuvah, he's soft. He's still forging his identity. So when you're still forging your identity, you can get bent very easily. So he says, don't involve me in building a community, making a home for God, and transforming the universe. I can't handle that. And the holy guy who thinks he's so holy and thinks he's in love with God says, don't distract me. I already have God. I don't need anything else. Me and God, we're buddies, one-on-one. We talk, we do this, right? I don't need that. People don't, they just distract. And then you have the copper Jew. The copper Jew, again, he's that bad Jew. Remember the Jew before saying, yeah, he has a label. He has a sticker. He got it when he got kicked out of a yeshiva 55 years ago, and he's still holding on to it. All that, that guilt that they gave him 55 years ago, he reformatted it into like a protective shield. Anyone with a religious look comes close to him, the armor goes up, right? I'm a bad Jew, stay far away. And the Torah says, how do you build a Mishkan? You need gold, and you need silver, and you need a copper Jew. And without all the Jews together, without the gold and the silver and the copper, guess what? You ain't got a Mishkan. You need all of them. So, that's one very beautiful idea right here. When we talk about transforming a home for God, you need every single Jew's hands-on participation. This is a story that's relevant to every single kind of Jew, no matter where they find themselves. Whether they're the Jew that's still holding on the Mount Sinai levels of spiritual revelation, they're so holy, they're so in love with God, they're like on Mount Sinai at the beginning of the Torah. That Jew, the silver, you got to be involved in making a home for God. You got to be involved in the physical universe, in specific measurements, in building, in construction, in creating a place, in creating a community where other people can connect to God. The Jew who's doing teshuvah, who's after Yom Kippur, and he's still he's all confused. He's in the golden calf. He did Yom Kippur. He's like, yo-yo. You have Jews that are like that. They're in the club one day, then they're in synagogue the next day, and then they're back to doing sins, and then they're back to feeling guilty, and back to shul, and then they disappear for a month, and they come back for a month, right? They're the gold Jew. They're like a spiritual yo-yo. They're still trying to find themselves. Don't get me involved. I'm still lost. I'm still on my own spiritual journey. We need that kind of Jew. And the Jew who thinks he's copper, the Jew who is post the building of the golden calf, but he hasn't yet gone to shul for Yom Kippur, that Jew also. The bad Jew, he's also a critical part of the building of the Mishkan. Without him, there's no Mishkan. Okay, so those are two different journeys, two roads to get to the same place, and who is needed in the Mishkan. But I want to spend the last 2 minutes talking about why do we wear gold wedding rings and silver is made more for loving kind? This is an excellent question. I'm going to talk about this right now. About the gold and the silver. So the question why we wear gold wedding rings. Mm-hmm. Silver in Kabbalah is a very good question, Erica. So in the way I just described it, what's more valuable, gold or silver? Gold. Well, you all know gold is more valuable because that's what you've been told in the world. Gold is more valuable than silver. But the way I described it according to Kabbalah, according to spirituality, what will be a better expression of a marriage, for example? I want to show my love to you. I'm getting married to you. I want to give you a ring. That's my act of commitment to you. I'm expressing my love for you in the giving of a wedding ring, right? So why do we give a gold wedding ring? Silver is the spiritual. No, I say it this way. Silver is the physical material that contains within it the spiritual properties of love. Did you understand what I just said? We know everything physical has spiritual properties. Kabbalah teaches us and exposes us to the inner, truer spiritual realities of the universe. So we are taught in Kabbalah that the spiritual DNA of silver is love. Kesef is nichsof, is longing, yearning. So why do we give gold at a wedding? Gold is fire. Gold is the guy that sinned and returned. Why not give silver? Or ask the question more simple. If the truth of reality, because Kabbalah is the truth of reality, if in the truth of reality, silver expresses a more pure kind of connection to God than gold is, then why is gold more valuable, more expensive than silver?
Passion, transformation.
Passion and fluctuation, okay. Transformation, okay.
It's much more precious.
I know it's much more precious. My question is why?
The different qualities.
Well, there's different qualities in silver too. That's true, but there's different levels of different. 14 karat gold, 18 karat gold, 24 karat gold.
What about platinum?
What about platinum?
I'm asking you.
I have no idea. We're not talking about platinum. It's not in the Torah. I'm talking about what the Torah says. I'm not giving you a class on metals now. I'm giving you a Torah class. And the Torah, platinum didn't make it in the Torah. It doesn't make it in my class either. We're here to learn about Torah. What? But platinum's not in the Torah. It's not one of the materials used in the building of the Mishkan, so it's not one of the materials that's relevant to us in our spiritual life. We only need to know what's relevant to us in our spiritual life. That's why we're here now. So my question is very simple, and it's what Erica was asking, which is if silver is more pure than gold. Gold is the fire, it's burning, it's transformation. Silver is pure. Silver is the unchanging quality. So why is silver not more valuable and more expensive than gold? Everything physical is a reflection of the spiritual. So the reason why something is more expensive physically is because spiritually it has more value to it. So why would gold spiritually have more value than silver if silver is pure love to God and gold is the fire of a guy that's sin, his transformation and all that? What do you say, Randy? Gold is more difficult to mine, that's true. It's less available. But what does that tell you? What does that teach you? What does that teach you? What does that teach you that gold is more difficult to mine? What? Yeah, Michelle said it. She knows because she's speaking from experience. To be about teshuvah. Gold, let's say this again. Silver is a tzaddik. He's a guy like me, FFB. Not that I'm a tzaddik. I'm not saying I'm a tzaddik. I'm saying I'm the silver that, for me, it's natural and easy to be in love with God. I've always loved God. I've only known God. I grew up loving God. I love what I do. To me, God is the most important thing in my life. It's always been that way. It'll always be that way. So for me, I don't have, not to say I don't have my struggles, I don't have my moments of fire, but for me, my life is a pretty simple life of silver. I'm in love with God. It's quiet. I don't need to jump and scream during the services because it's a natural. My whole life I've had that. From the day I was born in a holy environment with verses of Torah in my crib, and from then on, it's just been holiness. So, generally speaking, that's the idea of a tzaddik, of someone who's firm of silver. Gold, as we explained, is the Baal Teshuvah, the guy that's in the struggle of fire and he's burning stuff up. Explosions and things are coming and firecrackers and burning wood and smoke and you hear the whole place stinks what's burning. It's good. Says the Talmud, you would think, this we didn't talk about this morning, that's part of why I'm saying this now. Me and Robert had a conversation this morning. You might think that who's more holy, who's more precious to God, what's the more expensive spiritual material, the pure Jew from birth or the Baal Teshuvah? You would think that what's more precious? The holy Jew. You would think. Says the Talmud. You already know because you've been thinking you learned. Says the Talmud, "B'makim shabali tshuva imdim, afilu tzadikim burim einam yichelim lamed sham." In the place where a Baal Teshuvah stands, even the most righteous and pure of tzaddikim can't stand over there. Meaning as follows. Does God love a tzaddik who's pure, full of love to him? Of course he does. But what gives God the greatest pleasure? What gives God the greatest nachas, the greatest sense of satisfaction? Is not when someone is always in love with God. It's when someone is struggling to be in love with God. When someone has resistance. That's why the smoke. He has to give something up. And he has to burn something up. He has to sacrifice to make that commitment to God. To sacrifice for God is a sacrifice. That's why it's called a sacrifice. Pretty smart, right? It's a sacrifice. You're giving something up. It's being destroyed. It's being burnt. It's being transformed. And your whole life is being turned around. And what you used to do, you can't do. And what you used to enjoy, you can't enjoy. And what you used to do, you're giving away for God. You're transforming, and things are being burnt up and being, all being burnt up. All being burnt up. And that is what gives God the greatest pleasure of all. The Alter Rebbe gives a beautiful example of this. There's two kinds of sweet foods. There's food which is just sweet, full of sugar and honey. You get some cake, right? Candy. Candy is sweet. Anyone likes candy. A 4-year-old kid likes candy, right? The sugar. How could a kid not like candy? But if you're a really sophisticated person, you don't like candy. What do you like? You like a dish that's a mixture of sweet and sour ingredients mixed together. Sweet and sour mixed together Now you're talking a delicacy. Now you're already talking some fine cuisine. Yeah, a 4-year-old kid's not going to enjoy a good what? Sour Patch. That's all sugar. That's all sugar. I got to tell you, I remember one time watching my wife make a salad dressing, and I saw her putting stuff in there like, oh my gosh, you put that in this. She was putting in ketchup and honey and mustard. Like, how in the universe can honey and ketchup go into the same bowl? How is she doing that? I was freaking out. She was dumping honey and ketchup in the same thing, right? I love her food. My wife's an excellent cook. If you eat my wife's food, she's an A+ cook. A+ with a capital P. And she mixes honey and mustard and ketchup together, which I'm saying that's crazy. As a guy that doesn't cook, to see someone mixing honey and ketchup is crazy. But the flavor you can make when you mix honey and ketchup and black pepper and sugar and salt, like I said, sugar and salt together. What are you doing? Either sugar or salt. Sugar and salt and pepper and cinnamon and like black pepper and cinnamon going together. Like, now we're talking fine cuisine. When the Jew is a gold Jew, a Jew is fire. That's the most pleasurable, most expensive material in the world. Yes, it's very delicate, and that's why it's so hard to mine, because it's hard to be a Baal Teshuvah. And that's why it can be easily dented. A Baal Teshuvah is fragile. It's coming, it's easy to regress and go forward and go back. It's not smooth sailing. The tzaddik is current, and that's why you don't use it as currency. Currency is silver, because silver is strong. So a tzaddik, a person who's from his whole life, you can put him in this environment, that environment. If you're strong, you're strong. You know what I'm saying? Put me somewhere else. I'm not going to get bent so easily. I'm more strong in who I am. So I can go somewhere into a different environment. I'm not going to get dented. But a gold can be very delicate where you put the gold. If you don't take care of the gold, it will get all beaten up very, very quickly. Very quickly. Therefore, the greatest, most expensive material is the gold, the Baal Teshuvah. I want to thank Alice. She's posted a comment, which is very true and very good. I'm going to say it. What's the Hebrew word for community? Well, kihila, that's true. But aside from kihila, no, he's the shliach tzibur, right? The representative of the tzibur. The tzibur is a chazan. The proper Hebrew word shliach tzibur, the representative of the tzibur, the community. Although kihila is also a gathering, but tzibur is a proper word. How do you spell tzibur? With a tzaddik, beis, reish. Tzaddik is the beginning of the word tzaddik, a person. Beis is for Beinani, which is a middle guy, or the Baal Teshuvah. You know, you say the Beinani, but the Baal Teshuvah, the guy in the middle, the guy that's had that struggle in life. He's on fire. One day he's like doing the right thing, the next day he's like going out. But it's like fire. Fire's not steady. Right? Fire's not steady. You know, the fire is strong, and it goes down, and it goes back up, and then all of a sudden the fire found more wood like, underneath the other wood. Like, watch a fire. It's not consistent. It has good days and bad days. It's the Beinani. Then you have the Russian Jew, the bad Jew. You know, the Jew that's, I'm proud of my bad Jewness. And yet, in order to make a community, in order to make a home for Hashem, you need a tzaddik, and you need a Beinani, and you need a Rasha, you need a Baal Teshuvah, you need all of them, all together. And that's we already went over time. I was going to say the story about Elizabeth Daya. We all know the story, but I'll say in brief.
No,
I'll tell you the story. There was a man, on the end of the class, we went, it's okay, so we finally went over time. So there was a man in the Talmud, his name was Elizabeth Daya. He was a sinner of biblical proportions. He knew how to sin. You know, some people know how to sin. If I'm going to sin, I'm going to do it right, right? In fact, it says about this man, there was not a harlot in the world that didn't try out. He was professional. He was professional. This was a guy that he heard of a sin. He was religious in his sins. He have religious sinners. Some of us are sinners out of opportunity. Some are religious sinners. They search out sins. And once he got to a certain harlot in a place far away, who was very, very one of the most beautiful women in the world, charged a fortune for her services. He decided he had to go see her. There's a sin I haven't done yet. I better go, you know. So he went to go meet her. And he comes, he goes up 7 cushions to get to her, whatever, and he comes up on top of the bed, and she looks at him, and she blows out a breath. And she says, just like that breath was blown out, can never come back, I see that anyone can do teshuvah except for Elazar ben Dodaya. Yes. That he is so far gone, he will never be able to repent to God. He'll never be able to repent. And when he heard that, he was broken. He said, I'm so far from God, I can never repent. So the Gemara, it's a fascinating Gemara. The Gemara says he went out to the hills. He said, hills and mountains, plead for mercy for me that in heaven they should accept my teshuvah, they should accept my repentance. And the hills and the mountains said, how can we daven for you? We're busy praying for ourselves, because there's a verse that says that the mountains shall depart and the hills shall be removed. So okay, so he turns to the skies. So he says, heaven and earth, plead for mercy for me. And they refuse to plead for mercy for him. So then he says to the sun and the moon, plead for mercy for me. And they say, we can't. The verse says that we'll be wiped away. He says to the stars and the constellations, pray for me. And everyone says no and no. The host of heaven says no. And finally, no one's going to pray for him. And says in the Gemara as follows. He sat down. He put his head between his knees. And began to cry. He began to cry. And he cried with such intensity, with such fervor, that his soul left his body from his tears. He cried with such remorse and such guilt for how far he had sinned, that his soul left his body. And when he passed away, a heavenly abaskol, a heavenly voice came out and said that Reb, with the title of Reb, like Rabbi Elazar ben Dodaya, is destined for the life of a world to come. This rabbi, Elazar, he was a sinner. He wasn't a rabbi. He was running to prostitutes. He was doing everything in the book. This Rabbi Elazar ben Dodaya, he is destined to Olam Haba. And at that time, Rabbi Huda Anasi, Rabbi Huda heard this. He said in the Gemara, he said, there are some people who are Kana Ilamai B'chaye Ilam, they acquire their world, a whole lifetime of working. Whole lifetime, this rabbi has to be righteous and studying and learning everything properly to earn his place in the world to come. And there's Yesh Kaina Elam B'Sha'achas. There's someone who can acquire his world in 1 hour. 1 hour of teshuvah, who is able to go all the way up into the heavens to get his place in Olam Haba. Meaning, you have 2 ways of getting to heavens. One's the path of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He was studying, he was holy, he was silver, he was pure, he didn't do a sin. And then you have this guy who's a fire. He's transformed his entire life. He was intense about it. But he led a life, he transformed himself. That crying of his soul was fire. And with fire, which is represented in the gold, you can become the most expensive commodity in the world. You can become the most expensive item in the Mishkan. The most precious, valuable item in the Mishkan was the gold. We need them all. But the gold, the tzaddik, the Baal Tshuva, that works on transforming himself, is the first one on the list. The most expensive material that there is. Understand, my friends? And that is a story, that's like an introduction to us of the Mishkan. And God willing, next few weeks we'll go through different vessels in the Mishkan and how each one of them has a life lesson for us, God willing, the next few weeks. Next week, same time, same place, same channel. Actually, I don't know the channel, but same room for sure. Okay.
Same station.
Same stations. When it comes to technology, I can't promise. If you come here in the room, live for sure. Okay. Anyway, welcome to Ken, who's watching us from Breckenridge, Colorado. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the classes. See you next week, God willing.